Well, hey, friends of the pod, if you like the conversations on Cabernet and Pray, I want to invite you to check out our Rebuilding Faith online community. It allows you to dive deeper into these types of conversations each week with other people in a safe space. In addition, I'll send you my weekly newsletter that goes behind the scenes into what I'm processing and thinking about each week. You can find out more at the link in the show notes of today's episode. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cabernet and Pray, where we sip the wine and we stir the faith. And today we're sitting down with a legend. This is someone that shaped me. I started reading his books right out of college, and when I could explore new ideas, and I realized this guy is onto something, and to sit down with him 15 to 20 so years later is an absolute joy. And I know a number of you have already been influenced by him in some profound ways. But if you haven't figured out, I'm talking about the one and only Brian McLaren. He's an author, public speaker, activist, teacher, and former pastor. He advocates for a new kind of Christianity rooted in love and engaged in working for the common good, including a restored relationship with the earth. This is a man who is 69 years old right now and has lived well, has done a lot of life, has seen a lot of things, and has incredible perspective to give us today. This is episode 62, The Courage to Differ Graciously.
I've never shared this with anybody publicly.
If this was SportsCenter, that would be like such a hot take. Skip Bayless would have no idea. Stephen A. Smith would have no idea what to say if you drop that down. That is so good.
The joke I always say is like, how'd you learn so much? You got to drink a lot.
The power of food and beverage to lubricate an environment.
Resistance to change is hurting the church.
I'm not in the camp that God has a penis or a vagina or a body at all. I'm in the camp that God is a universal spirit.
This is the strangest podcast that I have been on. I don't even know what to do.
I'm kind of geeked up about this wine.
So this is my second glass, and it delivers a little more of a punch than I expected. So if I get a little loopy, it's your fault. You told me to drink on this show.
I will also say as a confession, I am a lightweight. So I've had like 3 sips of this wine and I'm already feeling it. So this is fun.
You've uncovered the mystery. You've exposed the formula.
You've just duct taped together a number of things that aren't normally hanging out together, and I'm here for it.
We're going to sit down at a table, we're going to have a glass of wine and some food, and we're going to talk about the beauty of Jesus.
Thanks for what you're doing with this podcast and for the creative way you're doing it and the beautiful, positive spirit in which you're doing it.
I really appreciate this venue, what you're doing. It is fun, and yet you dig into the deep stuff.
I've heard about your podcast for a long time, and I love that you're a pastor and that you explore the world of faith through wine. That's very unique.
I never thought of church history in terms of wine drinkers. I love this question. Really got my mind rolling.
You had me with herbaceous notes, I want you to know. I'm ready to just stay here and live in the wine tour.
I will never forget the first time I bought a bottle of wine by myself, which was yesterday.
If you're familiar with drunk history, I thought it's like drunk theology. So I
got a little spicy there. It's the peach wine.
Apparently the wine is, here we are. Queer we are. Beer we are. No, it's wine, Jeremy.
By the way, drinking this Pinot Grigio at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is making me even more direct in my communication than I normally would be.
I know why you have your guests drink wine. It makes sense now. Yeah, I get it. A little bit of liquid courage to really unleash the beast.
I think you've got a good podcast. So throw in the wine bit in there. That's nice, doesn't it? Cabernet and Pray, yeah.
Well, today I am joined by someone that really needs no introduction for most of the listeners to this podcast. Welcome to Cabernet and Pray, Brian McLaren.
Hey, so glad to be with you.
Well, I am looking forward to this conversation today. Before we dive into some of these ideas, we're going to talk about what we're drinking.
Okay.
And in honor of you today, Brian, I've got a really funky one, and I'm going to explain why I chose this one especially for you. So I'm drinking, for those of you who are watching this, you're going to notice this is the funkiest color I've probably ever had in my glass. This is bright orange. And this wine is called Tarangino. It's wine with Valencian oranges.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
And I thought it was fun, number one, because as I was telling Brian just a minute ago, I just got back from Spain last night. We were in Valencia, where we got to hear the story about all of these oranges and how big of a deal it is. And, you know, if you've ever had, for our beer drinkers on this, if you've ever had like a Blue Moon, you'll see that they'll say Blue Moon has to be with a Valencian orange. So this is the same Valencian orange, but it's made into a wine. And I was looking this up because I'm like, how are they doing this? From the best I can understand, they start with a white wine, then they add Valencian orange juice to it and let it ferment together. So totally unique, totally bizarre, really fun. It's a little bit tart, but it doesn't feel like a juice. It doesn't feel like a sangria. It has more of a body to it. So it feels like you're drinking more of a white wine, but with that orange zest to it. And what I wrote down, and this is where I thought, okay, this connects. I said, this breaks categories and challenges assumptions of what wine can be. And then I thought, what a perfect drink to go with my conversation with a man who breaks categories and challenges assumptions. So, Brian, that's what I'm enjoying for you today. What do you got in your glass?
Okay, so I should tell you, the wine that I normally like to drink is, I like Pinot Noir is my favorite. And I like dark reds. And but this is a Han Chardonnay from California. And I have not had a glass of wine since June because I had a bit of a health scare. And so this is going to be my first glass of wine since June. And I haven't been out to buy wine since June. And this was a gift from somebody to me. So that's why I'm having it. And if I'll make a connection to our conversation, it's this cause for celebration to be with you on this podcast for the first time. And it's a gift. So happy to be sharing this with you.
Well, that is excellent. Well, cheers to you, my friend. Cheers to all of you who are listening or enjoying this, if you're able to drink along with us today. All right, Brian, I want to ask you a question that I like to ask our guests. Again, you're not the typical guest in that I think most people who are regular listeners to this podcast probably already know your story. But in case they don't, one of the questions I love to frame our conversation and to remind people that we're on a journey. This is not, arrive at the right beliefs and then, white knuckle it till you die, is this question. If you look at the last 10 years of your life, how would you say that your faith has changed during that time?
Oh, what a great question. Okay, so I am 69. I know I don't look a day over 79. So the last 10 years, so that would be since 59. I think I have a good answer to your question. I should say my faith has been undergoing a lot of change for a very long time. So I have never felt that I was in a super stable, or certainly never felt at all stagnant. But this last 10 years, I think two things have happened in my faith. First, I just think as you get older, you don't want to, you don't have time to beat around the bush. So I think I felt freer to speak what's in my heart and maybe a little more aware that some will like it and some won't. And I don't have to worry about the ones who won't. I want to be of help to the ones who will find it helpful.
Right.
And then the second thing that's happened is, with over these last 10 years, it's been really the 10 years dominated by Trump. Even when Biden was president, in some ways, Trump was his foil at every turn. And watching white Christian nationalism gain more and more power, watching evangelicals, that was what my background was, but even a majority of Catholics and a slight majority of mainline Protestants sort of go with white Christian nationalism. I think one of the things that's happened in my faith is I've become less concerned about saving the church and the institutional church in its various forms, and maybe more concerned about the church becoming a more dangerous institution in the world because of what's going on, not just in this country, but in many countries, this fusion of right-wing politics, economics, and authoritarian tendencies with Christian faith.
Now, when you say, this is fascinating to hear you say you feel less of that need to save the church. I know that's a huge need for a lot of people, is this sense of this thing is, the wheels are falling off, things are bad, we have to save it, we have to get in there. You're arguing a different stance here.
Yeah, I'm not saying I don't care. But
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying I think it's fascinating. Do you think that's a unique place for you in this season where maybe you did that for a while and now, you feel like, hey, I'm supposed to focus on something else? Or do you think in a more general sense, it's not really worth trying to save it as it is? I guess those are two different ways to take that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Let's see if I can explain it, Jeremy. I think as I get older, that little phrase from the Bible, "in the fullness of time," makes a lot more sense. There's one of the most brilliant and fascinating teachings in Buddhism. It's called the law of no independent origination, or the idea is that nothing happens unless the conditions are right for it to happen. And if the conditions are right for something to happen, it will happen. And I feel like the Christian church has this conservative wing that has been afraid of the present and afraid of the future. And they, in some ways, feel that they're in a life and death battle. And when you're in a life and death battle, you can be desperate and you can take desperate measures. I think what we might think of as the liberal or mainline Protestant church and the somewhat progressive Catholic church, I think they didn't realize how tenuous their position was and how powerful the counter-revolution could be after Vatican II for Catholics and after kind of the civil rights movement and the progressive movement. And so in a way, the conservatives acted like they were losing and they were desperate. And so they worked really hard. And the more progressive people acted like they were winning, which meant that they kind of were not terribly energized. It was business as usual for them. And I don't think that's I haven't seen evidence of that changing. I think more progressive Christians are still in the mode of, isn't this terrible? Isn't this terrible? Every day there's new reasons to say, isn't this terrible? But it's very different to say, isn't this terrible? And to say, what are we going to do differently?
Right.
And that I don't see enough people ready to do things differently. So what that makes me want to do is to say, well, let's start dreaming about what differently would look like. And let's try to talk about that for when things get desperate enough that people will be ready. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
No, it does. And you're speaking. I would put you and Rob Bell in this same category, in the sense of you guys are always like at least 10 years ahead of where I feel like everybody else is. And I'll reference this in a little bit, but I remember even reading A New Kind of Christian in my 20s, and it was like the first exposure I had to these ideas. And as I look back on my journey now, those ideas seem so basic to me now.
Yeah.
But I remember then thinking, holy cow, like, what do I do with this? And, these ideas. And you were just further ahead than I was. It took me some time to catch up. And I try to remember that, if I'm talking to someone, I'm like, why can't you see this? It just takes time for people. But I would say there are people, you, Rob Bell, who seem to just be, you're on the cutting edge of where these ideas are going. And that's why you've been so helpful to, myself and to so many other people. So I want to talk through a number of ideas. This was a hard interview to create because it's like I could go so many directions with it. So I'm going to try not to overwhelm you with questions. But there's a couple books in particular that have been incredibly just valuable resources for me and for others. And I want to unpack some of the ideas that I've loved in those. One of them I want to begin with is your book, Faith After Doubt. And we have an online community called Rebuilding Faith where we try to walk together into something new. And as you talk about, hey, what would this look like? I think you have to lock arms with people to do that and figure out, okay, let's join together. And so that's one attempt at doing that. And we go through every 2 months, we'll go through a book together and have these discussions. And we went through Faith After Doubt, and I'll just tell you, from my point of view, none of the books we've gone through had anything compared to the conversations we had around your book, because you were giving language to these deep resonances that people had, and they didn't know how to explain it. And you have this line in the book that I think is so great. You say, doubt isn't the opposite of faith. It is an element of faith. And then you say this: sometimes I think it is my mission to bring faith to the faithless and doubt to the faithful. I'd love to hear you unpack. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. Well, this might be a fun way to get into it, Jeremy. We inherited a kind of Christianity that was defined by beliefs. What Christianity was a group of people who hold the same beliefs. And I think a lot of people cannot imagine any other way of defining Christianity. But let me just make a proposal. What if Christianity is supposed to be defined by desires, not by beliefs? In other words, what really matters is what you desire. Do you desire your neighbor's health and well-being? Do you desire for the world to be the kind of world that would fulfill God's desires? Isn't it interesting? You can have all the right beliefs and have the very opposite desires that Jesus would probably have, right? So the fact that Christianity got defined by beliefs and not desires is a very, very fascinating thing, because faith is not the same as beliefs. Faith is an attitude of trust, and faith is an attitude of trust in the absence of certainty. And the fact is, human life is uncertain. We don't know if an asteroid is going to pop out of space and, knock us out. We don't know, if some idiot billionaire is going to, trigger a nuclear war. There's so much we don't know. And so we put trust in certain things in the absence of our knowing. Isn't it interesting? Beliefs is a way of short-circuiting that and saying, no, here is what you have to know. And what really matters is what you say that you know or you believe, meaning you're certain of, even though you're not certain of it. So I think what many of us are struggling with is that we were given Christianity as a set of beliefs, and then we started tinkering with the beliefs, but we never asked the deeper question: what if it isn't supposed to be about beliefs at all? And what I try to do in Faith After Doubt is, by the time I present these 4 stages, and by the time you get to the 4th stage, you realize, what really matters isn't belief, it's love. And of course, this was in the Bible all along. Paul says faith, hope, and love are the great lasting qualities, but the greatest is love. Or in Galatians, he says the only thing that matters is faith expressing itself in love. So that was there all along. But isn't it funny? We have to go through an awful lot to get to the point where that we think, oh, he actually meant that.
Okay, you just mentioned the 4 stages, and that was one of the things as we discussed this in the community that people were just, this was like earth-shattering stuff to people. Like, oh my gosh, I'm in this stage, and I didn't realize. And so I found a quote that kind of simply explains your 4 stages, and then, you can unpack it. But you say the journey of faith through simplicity and complexity involves learning and perfecting beliefs. The journey of doubt through perplexity, stage 3, involves questioning not only specific beliefs, but the whole belief system approach to faith, which you were just talking about.
Right.
Then the journey into harmony, stage 4, is a journey beyond beliefs into revolutionary love. Yes. And what we realized, and I don't know if this is what you found in your own feedback of this, we had a whole lot of people in stage 3, was what we realized.
Yes.
And it was like this gathering of a bunch of stage 3 people that are desperate for stage 4 harmony.
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out how do we get there. And that was such a helpful guide, to kind of think through, unpack that a little bit for someone who maybe isn't familiar with your 4 stages, because I think this is a gold mine for people on their own journey.
Well, thanks, Jeremy. I as I say in the book, I really worked on this because it was helping me. And then when I was a pastor, I would share it with other people. So I'm very glad it's helping people. And let me just say 2 things about the whole idea of stages. First, what I did is I integrated the work of a whole lot of other people. Some people have 2 stages, 3, 4, 9. There are all kinds of different schemas. But when you look at them, almost all of them seem to fall into this kind of, a similar arc. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, many people know for the last several years I've taught with the Center for Action and Contemplation, founded by Father Richard Rohr. And the contemplative tradition in Christianity, what's so interesting about it is it's all about stage models. You can go way, way back. There's this work called The Cloud of Unknowing. It has a 4-stage model. Then Teresa of Avila has in her model of these mansions. It's a journey inward, and it's different stages of journeying inward to the deepest center of things. The interior castle, and there are lots and lots of other stage theories that come up in the contemplative tradition of Christianity. And I think the reason that that's significant is that institutional Christianity really has one primary question: are you in or are you out? So there isn't really growth, there's just arrival, and you have a status. But contemplative Christianity has always said, no, arrival isn't the point, you're on a journey. And the sense that we're on a journey, and there are ways you can talk about the phases of a journey. So that, I think, is why this rings true with people, because the truth is life is a journey. This whole universe is on a journey. Every living thing is on a journey. And so when we take that seriously, it all looks different. And of course, this just rings true with so much of what's in the Bible, but not what's in the theologies that shape many of us.
Right.
What's in the Bible is an unfolding story. Things are left behind. New things are embraced. Paul writes, we forget what lies behind. We leave it behind, and then we move forward. He says, when I was a child, I thought like a child. When I became an adult, I put away childish things. So that sense of growth, I think, is what rings true. It's what life does. But we were given this sense that, no, you've reached a status. You are orthodox. You are correct. You are conservative. You are Calvinist. You are whatever. And now your job is to defend and protect your status. Right. Very different approach to life.
One of the things that's so cool about the way you describe it is you say that it's not that you get to a new stage and then you look back and you judge the people on the other stage. In fact, what I think you do such a good job of is teaching empathy for people who are different parts of your journey. And just to give you a really cool data point from our experience with this, we had one of the members of our online community talk about someone had invited him to a kind of evangelical worship service with them. And, it wasn't his normal community, but he was friends with this person. Was like, I'll go with you this weekend. And he's sitting in there and he's just cringing, at all of this stuff that doesn't resonate with him anymore. It's not, it's not helpful. But he said he had this epiphany of, if I can get to stage 4, then I can make room to embrace where everyone else is at their journey in this room right now.
Yes.
And so he had this moment where all of a sudden it was like this supernatural empathy came over him.
Yes.
Where he was able to non-judgmentally realize that this might be what that person needs or that person needs, and on their thing. Yes. And I thought, and he very humbly said, I don't know if this is what stage 4 looks like, but this was my epiphany. Beautiful. And I thought, what a beautiful moment of the Spirit. But it, in large part, because you had given terminology for him to understand, okay, I'm in stage 3. I'm trying desperately to get to 4. And maybe this is how I do it, is by embracing those. And I just thought, what a cool reaction to these ideas.
My goodness, that's very encouraging to hear. And that's it exactly. And I bet he felt this. I know I felt it in my own experience. It's not like I had the idea of having empathy toward other people. I just never had that idea. My mind was shaped by who's right and who's wrong,
Right.
or who's winning and who's losing, who's effective and who's ineffective. My mind was so shaped by those things. And when you have this moment where you think, oh, that's not the only way to see, it's like this breakthrough, and you couldn't see it before, and now you can. And it doesn't mean you're saying it doesn't matter where you are, but it means you can only be where you are until you have the help you need to get to a different place. And yeah.
Oh, I think it's so good. You have another line. You say, faith before doubt, it's about correct beliefs. Faith after doubt, it's about revolutionary love.
Yeah.
Now, I love that, but I can imagine a more conservative person might look at that and go, oh, he's saying doctrine doesn't matter. Ideas don't matter. There's no truth, right?
Yeah.
So what is your response if someone's going, oh, I love that, but that feels maybe a little dangerous, you know, to say it's not about correct beliefs? How can you help them maybe release a little bit of that need to have these correct beliefs so that they can better embrace the revolutionary love of God?
Well, yeah. First, I understand why people would feel that way, because I felt that way myself, right? That's how I grew up as well. The first thing I would say, let's just be playful. I'm not arguing here, but let's just be playful. Isn't it interesting? Jesus said, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do the things that I say? Or he talks about people who say, Lord, Lord, and he'll say, I never knew you. So they have the right word. They're calling Jesus Lord. But having the right words was not the thing that Jesus was really after. Or James, faith without works is dead. You say you believe in God. Well, the devil believes in God, you know. James says faith without works is dead. John says in the New Testament, if you say that you love God but hate your brother, you're a liar and you don't walk in the truth. And then Paul says, the only thing that matters is faith expressing itself in love. If I have all knowledge, if I have all faith, and I have no love, it is nothing. So the Bible actually says this, but people in stage 1 have been trained by authority figures they trust, because in stage 1, we trust authority figures very much, and we don't want to disappoint them. And so we all select the authority figures either that are imposed upon us, or we find the ones we like. And we, of course, we believe what they tell us. But then you go through life and you watch some of those authority figures turn out to be very different than what they said they were. Or you do everything they tell you and your life still falls apart. Or you do what they tell you and you feel you realize you're hurting people and this doesn't seem right. So something happens that then says, I might have to think for myself. And when you think, I might have to rethink, by the way, that's what the word repent means. Repent means think for yourself. Stop just going along. Don't be conformed to the thought patterns of the world. Have a second thought about the way you've always thought. And then things might look different. And then you find out, oh, that's what Jesus was talking about. You know, that's what Paul and John and James were all talking about.
Love it. Yeah. It's a much better way to experience your faith than trying to get all your beliefs dialed in.
Well, especially because you think, you know, if you had gone to Jesus and said, Jesus, do you believe in the hypostatic union between the three persons of the Trinity? You know, it just wasn't going to come around for a few hundred more years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, we're gonna switch to a different book. We're talking about a book, Do I Stay Christian? Yeah. Which is a phenomenal title. Can I just say? I'm impressed you got a publisher to go with that one. Because that's what a lot of people, especially listeners of this podcast, are like, yeah, that's a question you're regularly working through when you see so much ugliness in Christianity in the church. And so I want to unpack a couple of my favorite quotes from this. You said, I was taught my religion's historical upsides and few of its downsides. And I was taught about other religions' historical downsides and few of their upsides. And then you conclude, that's a perfect recipe for creating ignorant and arrogant religious jerks. Which I want to say, amen, my friend, amen. How do we, you've already referenced Buddhism, which maybe someone, that caught their ear when you said that. How do we have a more loving approach to people in other religions and not become ignorant and arrogant religious jerks?
Mm. Well, I suppose if we look at the downsides of our religion and the upsides of other religions, it will be a humbling experience for us. And our religion has some pretty horrible downsides happening. I'm sure by the end of the day, we'll find new lows of many of our members of our religion, because we seem to be in a kind of a race to the bottom. We have lots and lots of people who think that empathy and compassion are toxic. Oh my goodness, just amazing. So if we look at the downsides of our religion through history, we'll just realize that the Christian faith has an awful lot of skeletons in its closet. And when you think, why didn't anybody tell me this before? Oh my goodness, then you have this wake up and it's not that you're necessarily doubting Jesus. It's not necessarily that you're saying, I think Jesus is wrong. It's that you're saying the version of the religion in which I was introduced to all this, either the people who taught me were ignorant, but why were they ignorant? Because the people who taught them were ignorant. And what does it say about a religion that doesn't want to face the truth about its past? It's something you got to love about the Bible, whether it's the Hebrew scriptures, where they talk about how many times they turned to idolatry and how many of their kings were terrible kings and how even their best kings were horrible people in many ways. So this telling the truth about our past is important. And then we look at the upsides of other religions. And one of the best things we can do is stop letting people of our religion tell us what other religions are about. And we can actually listen to people of other religions tell us what they love about their religion, and why it's meaningful to them and how it's helped them. And when that happens, it doesn't mean we give up on our religion, but it just means we hold it with a greater sense of humility and less arrogance toward people of other faiths.
As I'm listening to you say that, I'm even thinking about, so many people when they define, you talked about don't hear about other religions from people in your religion, right? Let the other people say, which means you have to meet them. You have to have some contact with them, at a minimum. You have to read something, I suppose, that they wrote or watch something. But even better would be to actually meet a Buddhist, to meet, someone who's following Islam, meet these people, ask them. And, it strikes me as the same reason why this fear in the United States around immigration and, this demonizing rhetoric of there are illegal people and they are the threat, and just dehumanization. Whereas, I want to say to people, like, who do you actually know? Like, have you ever sat down with someone who moved here to flee a situation or to come here for a better life? Like, have you actually heard why they did that, how they did that, what they're trying to do? And it's such a different perspective than when we just say, no, we as Americans are going to be the ones to tell you what these immigrants are.
Oh my goodness. Can I just tell you a quick story about that, Jeremy, as you say that? So I live in Southwest Florida. And when I first moved here, one of my neighbors had hired somebody to do some yard work for her. And his name was Norberto, and he was from Mexico. And he didn't have proper papers, but he was a good worker. And one day she called me and she said, could you come over here? I'm having trouble speaking with Norberto. I don't speak any Spanish. He doesn't speak any English. Usually we can communicate. And she said, I know you speak a little Spanish. So I came over and translated. First time I met Norberto, and then I had him do some work for me. And then we became friends. And one day I said, hey, can I take you out to lunch? So we went out to lunch and he told me his life story. Norberto is the first person I met. I've traveled all around the world. I've been in 40 some countries. First person I've ever met who is illiterate in his first language.
Oh, wow.
He never went to school once in his whole life. His mother had a whole lot of children by a lot of different men. And when he was 15, he was on his own, and he's been totally on his own. Never went to school, never learned to read, never learned to write. If you'd ask him for his phone number, he had it written down on a piece of paper in his wallet. He'd have to show it to you because it was not something he knew how to do. But Norberto truly was one of the best human beings I've ever met. The reason he was in America was that he had a couple of daughters by the same woman. So he's a step ahead of his mother. And one of his daughters told him she wanted to go to college. He was a bus driver, just lived on subsistence pay in southern Mexico. And the day she told him that she wanted to go to college, he said, I will go to America. So he snuck up here, got here, worked odd jobs, worked from morning to night, rented one room in somebody's house, spent only the absolute necessity on himself, and sent all of his money to his daughter. And he one day came and knocked on my door and said, in Spanish, of course, Brian, I wanted to say goodbye. My daughter graduated from college and I'm going home now. And I just thought, here is a human being who is a good man, And when I hear people make slurs on immigrants, it's just as you say, if you ever got to know one, it would be a different story.
Yeah. A word of caution to all of us, not to let our own tribe define other tribes.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yes, that's it.
Get out there and meet people.
And I should just add, there's this theory. It came from this French anthropologist named René Girard. And René Girard, I won't go into his whole theory, but I think it's something for people to think about. He said, when people hate each other, the way they find unity with each other is by finding somebody else to focus their anxiety on. The scapegoat process. He called it the scapegoat mechanism. And when authoritarian leaders want to amass power and unite people behind it, the way they do it is they find some people to project all of their fears and anxieties and blame upon. And if people understood that, we'd be in a very different world right now. But people have a lot of anxiety, and when somebody comes along and gives them somebody to blame for their anxiety, it's like a drug. It really is like snorting cocaine or something. It just gives you a high. Now I know what to do with my anxiety. I'll blame it on somebody.
And the sad thing to me about that, Brian, is that it works, and it has worked, and it will continue to work.
It's this psychological
history
glitch.
is just filled with it. The Bible is filled with it,
Yes.
And you go, can we not get out of this? This was the point of Jesus saying, look, put it on me and then move on. Like, you don't need to keep doing this and trying to free us from this cycle. And yet, we just keep getting stuck. I love that you brought up Girard. I was going to ask you if you were a fan of mimetic theory when you started talking about desire earlier, but I was trying to stay focused.
Yes. Well, and in fact, something that we could nerd out on René Girard, but something he didn't talk about much. He talked a lot about the negative desire when we have rivalrous desires that set us to be rivals with one another. But there is also positive desire. And that, I think, is what is waiting for us to be explored. I don't know what, I have 2 writing projects I'm working on now. But after that, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. But if I continue writing, I think I might want to write about liturgy and think about and maybe write liturgies as ways of building positive desires. So
I love it. Sign me up. All right, one more quote from Do I Say Christian? You say, our religion can hellify us, which is a great phrase, by inspiring in us an impenetrable sense of rightness or even superiority. Our religion is right, we believe, which makes us right. As a result, the more devoted we are, the more stubborn and unteachable we become. And everyone can see it but us, because we are blinded by our sincerity and zeal.
Yeah.
Which is such a profound insight. And that's so sad to me, because you have people who can be incredibly passionate. Like, I've met some Christians, I'm like, I really do believe you love Jesus and you are doing your very best to follow him. However, the way that you are doing this is creating so much damage in your life and in everyone else. But you want to honor the zeal, the passion is there. But as you're describing, when it's wrapped up in this mentality of I'm right, then it turns you into this kind of monstrous person. How do you think we help people if maybe you hear that quote and someone comes to mind of, you're like, oh, that's my neighbor, that's my friend, that's this person that sends me emails every week. How do we help people navigate that when the zeal is there? It's good. That passion is good, but it's turning them into this kind of monstrous version of themselves.
Yeah. It's not easy. It's really not easy, because what tends to happen is people who are in that zone are following leaders who are stirring up more and more zeal and more passion of a certain type. And if you criticize them or criticize their teachers, they'll just think you're of the devil. So I'm a big believer in the power of a non-directive statement. By non-directive, I mean you're not telling anybody what to do. You're just announcing something. And often it's even more powerful if it's vulnerable. So you might say something like, I used to see things the way you do. I don't see them that way anymore. You probably wouldn't be interested in finding out why, because why would you want to know what a heretic or an apostate person, as you would think about me? But if you're ever curious, I'd be glad to share it with you. So, you basically give them permission to think of you as a heretic or an apostate, and you aren't resentful about it. You just understand that's what they're being good soldiers in their army. But then you make them an offer. If you'd ever like to ask me, I'd be glad to talk to you about it.
I love that. It strikes me as just throwing a lifeline to someone and saying, like, look, it's there. And maybe it takes a moment for something to happen in their life before they want that. But I love extending that. That's a great image of just extending that out there. Like, hey, it's there and I'm here. And if there ever comes a time you want to talk to a heretic about that, I love that.
Using our four stages language again. When someone's in stage one, they're very, very zealous, and not very open-minded, because open-mindedness is seen as a sin, and they're already right. Why be open-minded to wrong ideas? It seems to me when that's where people are, we know it's going to take some hard things in life for them to change. They're going to have to be hurt, or they're going to have to hurt someone, or something's going to have to happen for them to change. So if what we can do is gently give them some awareness that we're not ashamed and we're not defensive, and we don't have to convince them we're right. We're giving them something that they're incapable of giving, which is a gracious difference. And that just sort of messes with your mind and makes you think, and that's a good thing. I think this is why Jesus told parables. Parables would take people in their imagination and put them in this conundrum where two of their absolutes were in opposition. And he would just let those stories sit. And if they did their work, the person might go through a process where then they were ready to think differently.
I love that. As you're saying that, it makes me think of how many parents I've seen that come down really hard on the LGBTQ conversation and very rigid, and this is an abomination and all that. And then one of their kids comes out to them.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they have this turmoil, and they can go either direction with it. It's, do I hold the line the way I did when this was a theoretical idea to me?
Yes.
Or do I acknowledge this is a person that I deeply love,
yes.
and now I may have to revisit this in an uncomfortable way? And as you've seen, no doubt, not everybody chooses to lean into these moments, but I'm always so touched by the people that do. That say, you know what, I think I might have missed this one, and I was always this stance, and here's this person who I deeply love that doesn't fit this narrative that I've been preaching for years of. They just want to go sin and do all this. And it's like, no, now it doesn't fit, and they have to do it. And what I love is, like, they need people around them in that moment.
Yes.
They need the heretics, right? To say,
yes,
come on in. Hey, we've been waiting for you. Like, we'll help you make sense of this now. And I love the idea of how do we, and I love your phrase, how do we be a gracious difference for people? And just, hey, we're just going to be there. And when the moment's ready, when the Spirit moves and things click for you, we want to be ready for that. That is a beautiful image.
The phrase courage and difference was a gift to me from an African theologian from the Congo. His name is Mabiala Kenzo. And Kenzo was telling me once years ago, what is it like to be a Black African theologian who has to think very, very deeply about Christian theology, but also with the awareness that white Christian theology created the colonialism that has so hurt his people and his continent, as well as many other continents and people. And he said, African theologians have to learn the courage to differ graciously. And I just think it takes courage. You have to differ, but you can do it graciously. And so that's where that came from. But imagine what it'd be like to be African and see all these arrogant white Americans and Europeans who are oblivious to the harm their religion has done that you've seen in your homeland.
Yeah, that's powerful. Okay, we're going to follow up on one more book. I have not read this book yet, but I'm super intrigued by it. So like I mentioned earlier, I read your new kind of Christian trilogy. I think I was in my mid-20s. I think it, as I recall, and I can't remember the years they were published. As I recall it, this was the first series I read once I graduated seminary, and I could just read whatever I wanted. No more assigned books. And I really enjoyed my undergrad because it started to plant seeds of there are other ideas out there. I got enough, where I was like, okay, I want to start exploring. And I'm a second generation preacher's kid, literally grew up in the pews. So I've been around the whole thing, but I had enough awareness that there were ideas I didn't know about that I was starting to get this inkling of, hey, there's some traditions I'm not familiar with. So I remember reading those. And like I said, I was so moved by them, but also perplexed because it was good for me, but I wasn't there yet. I wasn't ready to just embrace them. Yeah. But the fact that you did it in a story, I thought was brilliant because it softens it. It's not this. Here are the ways to think about this. It's, hey, you're going to follow this journey, in these conversations, and at some moments you might relate with this character, and other moments you're relating with that character, and you're going in and out of the dialogues and all of that. I thought was so good. And so I saw that you just recently released another fictional book called The Last Voyage. Now, I have not read this, so I can't speak to it. But I'm fascinated by this, and I'm going to go dive back into it. What can you tell us about this novel and maybe why you're back at it with fiction?
Yeah, so almost 25 years later, I'm coming back to starting a fiction trilogy because this is the first of three. I actually started writing this the day after the election in 2016. And when I realized that American voters elected a billionaire of questionable morals to run the country, it just said to me how much power money had. And I thought, what happens if billionaires rule the earth? And so I thought, I'm going to write a science fiction novel, and I didn't know what it was going to be. But my starting point was, what happens 30 years from now if billionaires get more and more power? And of course, I know it's hard to imagine a world where billionaires buy lots of cable news stations and then buy newspapers.
Yeah, like theoretically, I'm trying to use my imagination, Brian.
Yeah, and then buy social media platforms and then manage to shut down huge parts of the government, showing their great power. But if you project this ahead, where would it lead? And so the storyline that emerged is that two of these oligarchs, incredibly rich billionaires who have the chance to try to remake the world more and more to their liking, they don't want to play that game. And they think our fellow oligarchs, our fellow billionaires are going to destroy the world. Climate change, nuclear weapons, who knows what, they're going to destroy the world. And so they become interested in a Mars voyage. And of course, there is another billionaire we all know who has been talking about a Mars voyage for a long time. This is the very opposite kind of people who team up to try to do this. And what they're interested in is an assurance colony, and meaning if there was a cataclysmic event on Earth, we need to get something established on Mars. Of course, it's not a billionaire thinking he's, going to save things. It's other billionaires saying these billionaires are going to destroy everything, and so that's the setting for the novel. What happens is a problem turns up on this colony. It's a one-way trip. So when you're recruited and you go, you're not coming back, and something goes wrong, and that's why it's called The Last Voyage. Something's going wrong on Earth, something's going wrong on Mars, and they have time to send one more voyage to try to address the problems. And one of the things they realize is they have been perfect in their technical problem solving. The engineering is flawless, but it's the human element that they have missed. And so they now need to send some artists and a theologian and some musicians and people who are interested in plants and animals, not just for food, but because they think, hold it, we human beings need our fellow creatures. So that's sort of the setting of the trilogy.
I love it. I'm hooked. I'm curious, how would you describe what is writing fiction like for you compared to the other stuff you write?
Well, I'll tell you, when I wrote A New Kind of Christian 25 years ago, almost, I was writing it 25 years ago. What I realized is when you're writing nonfiction, you have to have in your mind an imaginary reader. And if your imaginary reader is smart, then your imaginary reader is going to challenge everything you say. And I think you become a good writer when you say, I don't want to confuse my imaginary reader. I don't want to leave questions unanswered. And I don't want to, I want to be careful. I want to treat my imaginary reader with respect and bring them on a journey and answer their objections and so on. But what that can mean sometimes is your books can be very, very, very long if you're going to handle every possible objection. When you throw a group of characters together, you put them in a predicament, and then you see what they're going to do. You only have to answer, this character only has to answer the question this character would ask. and in some ways, it makes things, I think it allows you to go places faster than you could go otherwise.
That's interesting. So you're obviously writing to try to communicate theology and certain ideas. How do you mentally do that when you're writing these characters? Are you thinking like, hey, this is the good character that's gonna, be? Do you see yourself in characters where this guy's saying all the things that I'd want to say, or do you see yourself in all the characters in different ways?
Yeah, in different ways, I see myself in all the characters. Yeah, and I'm not really trying. I suppose what I bring to writing fiction, even in The New Kind of Christian, that was very content heavy, but what I'm doing is not really trying to illustrate ideas in a story. I'm really trying, because I have a theological background, I see theology interwoven with all of life, but also sex and ego and money and, depression and all kinds of other things are interwoven with life. When you only write about theology, you almost act as if sex and depression and money and power and all kinds of other things don't exist, right? Or they only exist through your lens. But when you work with fiction, all of them are just part of life. And so that's something I'm enjoying a lot at this stage in my life.
That's cool. I'm looking forward to reading that. All right, I want to transition. I want to ask you a few questions that we like to ask each of the guests, and then we get to compare your answers to everybody else's answers. So we get to see how Brian McLaren answers these.
Okay.
So we'll do a couple wine questions. If I were to ask you, what is the best glass of wine you've ever had in your life? Is there one memory, one story that comes to mind? Is it because of the type of wine? Is it the setting? Is it who you're with? Do you have anything that comes to mind when you go, that was wine as good as I have ever experienced it? What do you have?
Okay. Can I tell you two quick stories?
Absolutely.
One of them was not, I wouldn't say was my favorite wine, but someone brought me a bottle of wine from Germany once, and they told me it was a very unusual wine because it, a little bit like your wine with the blood oranges. Apparently, this wine had hops in it, or some beer-like elements, and I just remember drinking that wine. I thought, this is the perfect marriage of wine and beer.
Oh, cool!
And I've never been able to find that wine again. So. So that's, and I wouldn't say it was my favorite, but it was sure interesting, and it stays with me.
It's memorable.
I have a friend who was about my age, and he died a few years ago, and of course I didn't know it would be our last birthday. We happened to be together on his birthday, and he really was a wine aficionado. And we went to a restaurant, and to celebrate his birthday, he bought a really expensive bottle of Cabernet. And I just remember sharing that bottle with him and thinking, this was worth the money. This was so good. Amazing and interesting and perfect and multi-layered. And of course, the fact that he had a fast moving form of cancer that took his life not too long after sort of makes that even more intense. But remembering enjoying that bottle with him and two other friends at a table one night was a great memory.
What a sweet memory to have with your last memory with a friend.
Yeah.
An amazing bottle of wine.
Yeah.
I love that.
And he was being good to himself. Like, it's my birthday. I'm going to be good to myself.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes you got to splurge for that nice bottle and enjoy it.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to get your take on church history here. Which member of church history would you trust to pick out a bottle of wine for you? And who would you not trust and why?
Okay. Well, I love St. Francis, but I have a feeling he wouldn't want us to have a really, really good bottle of wine. So that'd probably be a problem. I'll tell you who comes to mind. She didn't drink wine. She drank beer. But St. Bridget, very ancient, in early Celtic history, St. Bridget has this beautiful little prayer meditation, her poem. She said, I would like to have a vat of beer and share it with all my friends. And Jesus would be there, and we'd share it with him too. She'd be a nice person.
Yeah, she'd be solid. I feel good about that. Yeah. Okay, who are you not trusting? Who you're not asking to pick that bottle out for you?
Well, I'm not trusting St. Francis because I even though I love him dearly, I just think he would pick the cheapest wine he could find because he wouldn't want the money to be wasted.
Oh, that's great. All right, well done. I like it. All right, what is something you used to believe that it turned out later you were wrong about?
I used to believe the Bible has one message. And now I think the Bible is full of arguments. It's not contradictions, it's arguments. And those arguments are way better than if it all just had one message. The arguments show us people learning and growing and interacting over time.
That's great. What do you see as the main issues facing Christianity in America today?
Well, I mean, American Christianity has been a racist project from the beginning, either intentionally racist, and we have to realize the Southern Baptists, the Southern Presbyterians, who are now the PCA, many of our main denominations came into existence. There were the Southern Methodists who rejoined and created the United Methodists, but they just separated again. These represent forms of Christianity that came into being to justify racism and slavery. I mean, it's staggering that this is our history. But even the other denominations, part of the ways they prospered was by never complaining, because it wasn't just the South that profited from slavery. It was the North, because the North was full of all the cotton mills that were turning that cotton into fabric. And both North and South collaborated in the extermination and relocation and land theft of the indigenous people. So I just don't believe American Christianity ever had a good period. I think it's been a very conflicted, dishonest, troubled project in most of its forms, not all of its forms. Obviously, the Quakers, I think, have a little better history than some others do. The black churches that were trying to survive rather than perpetuate slavery, they have a lot to teach, I think.
Yeah. What is something that's blowing your mind right now that you're learning?
Oh, I have been reading this Japanese socialist philosopher economist named Kojin Karatani, Karatani, who wrote a book called The Structure of World History. And I'm so intrigued by his insights into what he calls modes of exchange that shape civilization. And here he is, a socialist, I think an atheist, and he basically says our current form of economy, that is capitalism built on top of authoritarianism, that this will destroy us. And so we need a new form of economy, a new mode of exchange. And he said the only place we can get it is from our spiritual traditions. It's so fascinating. He's basically saying we need the spiritual traditions to wake up and give us something to save us, from our current system.
Interesting. What was the title of that book?
The Structure of World History. It's a very difficult book to read. It's worth it if you have the time and energy. But if you go online, you can see on YouTube, a lot of people are summarizing his thoughts, and he gives some lectures on it that are more accessible.
I love a good book recommendation. What is a problem that you're trying to solve?
Well, I think one of the problems I'm banging my head against the wall with is that the only open forms of Christianity, open to change right now, that aren't trying to go back into the past but want to move forward, are progressive Catholicism, progressive Protestantism. There's also a progressive movement in Orthodoxy, a little harder, a little more difficult to see, but it's there. But how do these forms of Christianity break out to get on with their work, rather than feel they have to bring the institution along with them, which just isn't going to happen in a short enough time span.
Interesting. What's something you're excited about right now?
Well, I'm beginning a sabbatical, and I'm not doing any public speaking next year, and so I'm very much looking forward to letting things settle and seeing what comes to the surface.
Very cool. All right, Brian, is there anything else that you want to add that I haven't asked you about, but we could not close this conversation out without addressing?
Well, I want to ask you, tell me about your favorite wine that you've ever
my
had?
favorite wine I've ever had? Okay, so Pinot Noir is my favorite go-to wine in Oregon in particular. That's my go-to. But I would say my wife and I a few years back were able to take a Bordeaux river cruise to France, and just fell in love with because the wines you can have when you're at a winery are very different than the wines that they send commercially. So when you're in these countries and you're having, wines that they made there, that's not the kind of stuff that you can even get, in the States. And so we're having wines that are just blowing me away. But there was one in particular. It was one night the cruise kind of offloaded us to this chateau. And they had this amazing dinner, and they had 4 wines at this dinner. And it was one of those, I've never had a dinner like this, where there was servers just watching your glass. So they would pour you a wine. If you drank that, they would come immediately after and refill it for you. So, it was just one of those, like, the wine was flowing and you were not going to sit with it. No one had an empty glass at any point. And so if you were on number 1 and you drank it, they would pour number 1. By the time they got to number 2, if you drank it, they're pouring you number 2 again until they get to them. We get to the last. So I'd had a good amount of wine, right? I'm sober. I can remember it. But I had a generous portion. We get to the 4th one, and they had saved their big boy for last, which very much, the story of Jesus, why would you do it this way? And I remember having this glass, sitting there in France at this chateau with my wife. I had just had this unbelievable, 5-course dinner type thing with wine that was, just flowing, and such a generosity of wine. Like normally, even if you're sharing, wine with people, it's like, okay, 1 bottle, is about 4 glasses. So, if you're sharing a bottle with 2 people, you each have 2 glasses. Like you're always kind of mindful of, I want to make sure everyone has enough. To have a dinner where that was completely out of it. It was like, quantity is not an issue. Yes. And just a lavishness. And then to get to that 4th one, and it was one of those, I tried to buy a bottle and bring it home, and it was like, we don't have enough to send this. This is kind of like, this is the only time you can have it. So then it was like a rarity of like, I'm only going to taste this right here. I'm never going to have this again. And that to me was like, that was all the stars aligned. My favorite wine drinking memory. I think about that one a lot.
Thanks for sharing it. As you were saying that, I was thinking we have that phrase, make love, not war, right?
Yeah.
There's so many great things people can make instead of war. Make love, not war. Make music, not war. Make wine, not war. If we would turn away from violence and hatred, we can make some beautiful stuff.
Oh, I totally agree. And I had an elder one time when I was the lead pastor. I had an elder who always used to say, food is just fuel. So if he and I go out to lunch, I'd be like, hey, where do you want to go? He's like, I don't care. It's just fuel. And I remember thinking, like, what a sad way to live your life. Like, yes, food is fueling our bodies. That is an element of it. But it just ignored beauty, and it ignored craftsmanship, and ignored the experience and joy. And I remember always having like this rub with, food is just fuel. And so I agree with you. I love it when you get to enjoy someone who's put a passion into something that, I can't make wine. I don't know how to do this. I understand the concepts, but I'm not out there doing it. So when I get to enjoy someone who's an artist, it's just such beauty. And then when you're with people, it's like, oh man, it's so good.
It's so good.
That's why we do a podcast, Cabernet and Pray. We talk about wine and beauty and Jesus and how they all go together, Brian.
It all goes together.
All right. If someone has been living under a rock and they don't know how to connect with you and they've never heard of your work, but now they're going, I like this guy, I got to dive into this. What's the easiest way for people to connect with what you're doing?
My website is brianmclaren.net. BrianMclaren.net. And all my links to social media. And I have a podcast that I do called Learning How to See. And they can find out what's going on with me there.
Excellent. I will put that in the show notes for all of you guys. And Brian, I just got to tell you, this has been an absolute joy. I have been hugely shaped by your work from afar. And so to have the chance to sit down with you 15, 20 years later is a real joy and a treat. And you have given so much life, so much encouragement, so much hope to so many of us who have been beat up by this stuff. So thank you for taking a time with us today. And thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Well, thanks. It's been a pleasure for me. And thanks for what you're doing with this podcast and for the creative way you're doing it and the beautiful, positive spirit in which you're doing it. If people become connoisseurs of a good heart, it will take us where we need to go.
Amen. I love that. Well, everybody, I hope you have enjoyed this episode as much as I have, and we will see you on the next episode of Cabernet and Pray. Bye, friends.